stream is up at 5, 4, 3, 2. And we are live, coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere in Northeast Ohio. I'm Josh McClay, a.k.a. Omally of O'Malley's Adventure. That's Jim Haavisto, running for City of Massillon Council at Large, and this is Omally Live. I want to thank everybody for joining this evening. We got caught up watching the countdown on that screen when we should have been watching the countdown on the other screen. How you doing, Jim?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic as well. It's another election cycle.
It is.
So, you've been on the show before. Very relaxed, lighthearted, just like you're looking at the wrong screen.
It's the only way I know how.
Just wing it.
Let's see. Where am I looking here?
Right.
Just to make sure.
Just looking
at
here.
you.
Just look here, and we'll let the camera do the rest. So
you're the professional here. I'm just filling the words on this side.
Professional is a stretch. I hit buttons until things start working.
Right.
So, anyway, this evening got a few topics I want to ask you about. It's the same for everybody.
Sure.
But it is interesting how different the answers are with the first question. And to me, it's the simplest. And it's crossing Lincoln Way with the new crosswalk there with the streetscape. Now, I went down, I looked at it.
Right.
If you look this way, you can look up the hill almost to Long John Silver's.
Right.
It's straight.
Right.
If you look this way, you can look up to the old Finney Frock furniture place. I don't know what it's called now.
Right.
I'm looking at it. I see why people are concerned, because nobody would just say, okay, this is a problem, because the road's been there for, 150 years.
Right.
My personal opinion is look both ways before you cross the street.
Right.
Both intersections are still open left and right. You can
Correct.
cross there. What's your thoughts on how council should proceed with that crossing?
Well, I certainly have listened to the debate.
Okay.
And I heard heard from the parents of a young man.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been across that walkway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not new for us going downtown. Do I like what's there? No, never did. Not from the beginning.
Okay.
I think it's a distraction more for the drivers going through there than the person crossing. As for the crosswalk, I've taken at the time, my grandson is 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I don't move the fastest anymore.
Right.
We've walked across there. We've looked both ways. You look one way, you cross the street, stop in the middle. That's the idea behind it.
Right.
You look the other way, stop in the middle.
Right.
And I've always seen clear sight there.
Yeah.
No different than crossing any other street. Do I think it's necessary to be there? I thought it was a mistake to put it in to begin with.
Right.
Along with that raised curb in the center. So I don't want to get off topic of it.
Right.
But I don't know where signage, signs, you can have so many signs they become ineffective.
Right.
So I'm not buying that. I wish the center divide was not there at all.
Right. And it was just a straight shot.
Straight shot going through. I find coming through there, I've personally had to hit the brakes for someone parked along the side. There's no way to move to the left a little bit when they open their car door,
right,
and so on. So there's other logistics that I think make it a bad decision to have put in to begin with.
Right.
But I don't understand I just don't understand the crosswalk thing.
Right. No, and it's sort of interesting because there is two ways to look at that.
Sure.
If you're the person crossing, or if you're the person driving.
Right.
And there does tend to be some clutter there. It'll be interesting to see how that's handled.
Right.
Because you could go as far as to remove that island. But do you really want...
There's a lot of concrete there.
Yeah. Do you really want to start tearing up a brand new project? Because my experience with that is, if you tear that out, it'll never be the same.
Right.
It won't be right. So...
I would... And I don't know the costs or anything, so I don't want to speak ahead of actually doing the research.
Sure.
I wouldn't have my feelings hurt if that was taken out.
Mm-hmm.
However, you still have, now that it's done, what's done is done.
Sure.
You have to look and see if it's worthwhile cost-wise, safety-wise, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think I guess depending on how many accidents there are and so on in that area,
Yeah.
I think that's where you take a look at it and say, hey, maybe it needs done.
Sure.
But that would take some time still.
Moving on to animal control. Now, animal control come up the last cycle. And what's interesting to me is I've never heard anybody say they didn't want it.
Right.
It's something that we've had in the past.
Right.
I believe council has brought forward legislation to do that to some degree. I don't believe it was for a police officer. It would be more in the lines of code enforcement.
Right.
And yet we still don't have it.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on animal control?
Well, I believe from what I've seen over the last several years, the administration, even from the time that position was eliminated, I think they've been very resistant to animal control on the administration side. I don't know why. Looking at animal control, with it being effective, I just don't think the police officers are going to do it. I just don't.
Right.
So that's where the problem comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can add another duty onto the police. I certainly want to be out there taking care of all the things they deal with, and then having to deal with, other than an extreme situation, a vicious dog or something like that.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't want a police officer to be sidetracked with all the feral cats and et cetera.
Right.
I think it can be justified. I think it's a good idea. I don't know that Stark County, it doesn't sound like they're doing a lot. I understand they take care of the dog calls maybe and some limited.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's being handled effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And our neighborhood that I live in, I'll be very honest with you, we've been in the southeast side, in the two neighbors, the University Village area, which is close to the Legends, of course, and then now in the condos off of Richfield Drive. And we haven't had the animal issues there, but again, it's a newer part of the city.
Right.
But I understand there are areas, talking to everyone from city workers to residents,
Right.
where the vicious dogs and so on,
Sure.
and of course the cats, are a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, something needs to be done. I believe there needs to be a position for that in the city.
Okay. The last one is the rental fee. And one of the reasons that this one kind of has me scratching my head is the codes that they're going to enforce with these rental fees apply to all homeowners.
Right.
It's not a specific set of rules that would apply. And in my head, I'm thinking, if all those codes apply to everybody, why are you only going to charge a fee to one group of people? And that's where I'm sort of stuck on it. You know, if it was a special set of rules for, like, if you're a restaurant, you know, they come in, they inspect because you're serving food.
Correct.
Right? I'm not, this one, I got some ideas. Give me yours first.
Where I think it parts from whether they're standard rules or special rules for the building code. To me, there's a large difference when you take a former family home or you buy a piece of property for any other person than a family themselves to occupy and live in, an owner occupied. I think that takes it to a different level, because now in my home, if I don't take care of things, who's at risk for the most part? My family, myself.
Sure. Okay.
So there's a different motivation. I'm taking it from the idea of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
When you rent that home to another individual, and the same with commercial buildings, all of a sudden becomes a business.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like it or not, I mean, I'm licensed through the Massillon City Health Department. I pay a reasonable but noticeable fee every year just to sell hot dogs out of a trailer that primarily aren't even sold in Massillon.
Right.
But it's just the way business is done, so I pay that fee. So when you turn any building into occupied by someone else for profit,
Yeah.
I think it changes the scenario. And again, I'm not a big tax guy, I'm not a big fee guy, but I think there is an increased liability due to that. So again, I think an inspection, and I've had a couple of commercial business owners that didn't like it, called me about it, and I told them I'm a fan of inspections every so many years.
Right.
It doesn't have to be burdensome. It
Right.
doesn't have to be a huge fee, but I am okay with the right boundaries
Right.
of
So
holding commercial properties or rental properties to a different standard of how it's done.
so then you would be for different codes being enforced on those properties?
I would be not necessarily.
Be-
It depends on, and again, not knowing all the details of the code,
Right.
what that is. I think we do have to look at.
Here's kind of my thinking. I see why they're doing it, like you said, because there's a certain liability. But what they're enforcing would also apply to you at your home, right? Those same codes. They're worried about knowing who owns it, right? Why not just put a small fee on the sewer bills like they do with the lighting and storm sewer? It applies to everybody, and everybody pays for that extra code enforcement guy because he's doing the same thing with your property that he's doing to a rental property. And if you put it on the sewer bill, if I'm not mistaken, if let's say somebody doesn't pay their bill, right, they can't shut off your sewer.
Right.
But if that property changes hands, there's a lien at the county via that sewer bill.
Right.
The city's going to get their money.
Right.
And kind of one of the reasons I'm going this direction is, and I can't remember which council member said it, they said it's the cost of doing business. And me personally, I don't know that government has a position to say this is going to be your cost of doing business. I shy away from that. So
I think I understand where you're coming from, but again, it's widely accepted in every industry.
sure.
Government mandates and charges fees and does inspections, and again, once you turn that property into a for-profit situation and add someone else that's involved, again, you don't put smoke detectors in your home. You put yourself and your family at risk. That's a choice you make on your private property. You don't put smoke detectors into a place that you've rented out and they assume everything is safe and ready to go when they rent that property. Now the liability is different, and now you're affecting someone else in a for-profit business, just like health departments just like health inspections at restaurant.
Sure.
I don't love them. We have a great relationship with the Massillon Health Department.
Right.
We have no problem with inspections. We pay our fees, but that's because it affects other persons. If I would make that same food and give it away, or my family eats it, no fees involved. So indirectly, the renters do pay for that fee. I understand that. And it doesn't need to be so unreasonable that it has to create rents that skyrocket. That's not going to happen.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next thing. It would turn into sort of a poor man's tax because the renters will pay for it. But maybe if they showed me how much they're collecting now on code enforcement.
Yes.
Because what I wouldn't want it to see happen is they start collecting the fees from landlords,
yeah.
right? And then none of the codes be enforced.
Right.
And then it just becomes a revenue stream.
Right.
That is one of the cautions that I have, because we've kind of seen that before at different levels of government, not just at a local level. So
Well, first of all, it's not as hard to determine all you have to do is, there's a lot of different ways you can validate who lives at a property, first of all. So that's not an issue. Not a huge issue. But again, I think if you're looking at it as a business, I think the city probably has an obligation not to, and I'm not saying go in and pound everybody every year. Maybe it's an every 3 year, maybe it's an every 5-year inspection. And again, there's a lot of details to be looked at. How much is that going to be? What's the revenue stream? And you're right. If you're not enforcing those codes after creating a fee for inspection, because you can't just charge someone a fee. It's got to be some type of an inspection, like you pay a fee to have a scale checked, etc.
Sure.
There's got to be something for that.
Right. And is I see almost a light parallel between that and, let's say, crossing the street on Lincoln Way. Are we really at some point there's going to be a line that's crossed where you're trying to legislate safety? That doesn't work. I mean, it's been tried. So maybe if there was a way to you there's initial inspection and then maybe some type of insurance for afterwards.
There's a little more when it comes to the rental property. I would think it's a little more broad than legislating safety. And again, I mean, that has been, like it or not, it's increasingly become the role of the government. But when you're talking about code enforcement, it may be something as simple as keeping the exterior of a home cleaned up.
Right.
And sure, they enforce that some with private residents.
Right.
But if that's something that's made to stay, because rental properties in some instances become rundown properties very quickly.
Well,
and it's easy to ignore with out-of-state owners and so on. So now the citizens do gain something in property values and et cetera. Their homes with a few bad rental properties around it can lower their actual property value.
Right.
If you keep them up to code, at least reasonably,
sure,
it increases their price. So there is a cost and benefit factor as well. It's a little more indirect, but it definitely is there. I've said that with the downtown buildings until they redid the facade downtown.
Right.
The city's investing all this money in streets and everything. But what are they doing? They're improving properties and values of property that the landlords themselves are not willing to take care of.
Sure.
And that's an unfortunate benefit to them.
Right.
It's great for them. It's not good for the people that have front of the bill. So
sure.
It's all, there's so much entangled in that. I still am okay with the idea of setting up something that's not burdensome.
Right.
That's a fair fee. But I agree, if they're not doing the inspections and not enforcing the codes after that, that would definitely be a problem. It would be a money grab then.
Yeah, and that's, I would hope that it doesn't turn to that.
Right, I agree.
But no, that's my last question is this: you're elected council at large, and you only can pick two pieces of legislation to pass in your term. What would they be?
I've kind of going back to my roots politically and what I've lived by for years, even personally. I do classify myself as a conservative in many ways.
Okay.
And I would, rather than deciding on what new legislation is going to be out there, our city, as well as any government entity, we are loaded with ordinances and rules and things that are, for instance, political signs. I approached a council person, I'll just leave it generic. I approached a council person. I said, listen, our rule on political signs, like it or not, is unconstitutional because government has a limited role in limiting speech.
Sure.
And I said, I'd like some help to have that changed. And no response whatsoever. Yeah, let me check into that. Go back a second time. I'd like some help changing this. Nope. So, yeah, we have to look at things that need to be changed and reduced. There's plenty of rules and regulations in the city of Massillon and everywhere else.
Right.
So before I'd say we need to legislate something new, I mean, we've talked about some of the key issues in the city already.
Sure.
So to legislate something new, I'd be very careful about that. Let's see what's going on and what needs to be done.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of other areas we can clean up or maybe update legislation and ordinances rather than creating new. There's a lot of old stuff on the books out there in every area.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that's kind of a backward step from bringing legislation, but I think it's very important.
Right.
Because I bet you and I don't know I bet you we don't know 90% of the rules there are in the city.
Right.
So
anyway, it's good having you on. I look forward to having you on again. We're coming out of this COVID shell. It's interesting to get back into like more face-to-face versus virtual, even though
and if I may make a comment about COVID.
Sure.
Just so it's a little more personal. My family and I my wife and my son,
Mm-hmm.
all of us had it about 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
All got sick at the same time. Just for those of you that are panicking out there, I understand it's different for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but don't panic if you get it.
Right.
Just go through it. Ours, just so you know, ours was pretty much like a flu
Mm-hmm.
for the first week, and then it took about 3 to 3.5 weeks to really get full strength back, but you weren't sick all that time.
Right.
And again, every experience is different,
Right.
but
I was gonna say most of the people that I know that have had it, that's kind of that, and they said that the symptoms kind of come and go in waves.
right.
And,
And,
but
and I have friends, at least two, that did die from it.
yeah.
But, I just want to encourage people. There's so much fear out there about it.
Right.
Back off from the fear. Take it a step and one day at a time. It's like anything else in life.
Sure.
So, sorry, that's off the subject.
No, but
I wanted to throw that out there.
Anyway, do you have anything that you want to put out there as far as? I want to apologize real quick. I did not get all the council people running this year. I only had enough time for council at large.
Right.
I did get a hold of Julie. If you're watching, I want to apologize for that. I should have contacted people and said, hey, time is.
I gave them all your cell phone number, so.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
No.
Be ringing off the hook now.
No, from my side, I'm just out here for one reason only, and that's public service.
Sure.
I offer my services as a businessman, salesperson, and a professional to those if you're interested and you think I can add something to the city. And we didn't talk about economic development, but that's my big push.
Sure.
And if you think I can add something to the city and help make the city a better place, I'd appreciate your vote on November 2nd.
Outstanding.
Thank you,
Good
John.
having you on.
I appreciate it.
Tomorrow evening we will have two. Jamie will be on at 5:30. Ed Lewis will be on at 7:15. And then I get to go on vacation. Thank goodness.
Nice, and we'll be watching.
Until next time, stay sharp, keep a tight shot group, and rock on. Peace.